And We Go Green is the documentary feature film currently available on Hulu about the fastest growing sport in the world, Formula E racing. As opposed to Formula One racing, all the cars in Formula E are electrically powered. The film was produced by Leonardo DiCaprio and directed by Fisher Stevens and Malcolm Venville. Fisher Stevens has been an actor, producer, and director, including an Academy Award for the documentary The Cove in 2009. Malcolm Venville's projects span the mediums of film, television, commercials, documentaries, as well as publishing 3 works of photography. The film is a fascinating look at the high-speed world of Formula E racing, as well as a vision of the future of electric cars for us all. Here to talk about the making of the film are the 2 directors. Thank you, gentlemen, both for joining us here today to talk about your quite remarkable film, And We Go Green. The first question I have is that Formula E racing is the world's fastest growing sport, and it's done that in only 4 years. Now, that alone should be enough of an impetus to do a documentary. But what really initiated? What were your motives for jumping on this project?
Well, I think we want people to drive electric cars, I think was the bottom line. And I had made a number of environmental documentaries, and I thought, well, actually Leonardo DiCaprio, it was his idea to do this film because we had just made Before the Flood, which was kind of a straight up environmental doc about how the planet is burning. And the original title of that movie was called Are We Fucked, actually. So this one is, we thought, well, let's go at environmentalism a different way through the environment. And when he introduced me to Formula E, I wasn't really that interested, to be honest, because I didn't know anything about racing or cars. I've never heard any of these drivers. And that's when I kind of called Malcolm, who's a great friend of mine, who I knew is a kind of professor of Formula One, wanted to be a driver at one point in his life, and is an amazing director, and can also really, I knew he knew how to capture cars in a beautiful way. So once Malcolm, I asked him if he thought this would be an interesting film, and once he said he'd do it with me, there was no turning back.
Is that right, Malcolm?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was a really interesting project, because I knew I could shoot cars. So I've done so many car commercials, and I come from a photographic background. I knew I could frame cars, and I knew the arc, the history of motor racing, and I dreamed about it as a young man. So I was really, I drifted into film, but there was nothing more exciting to me than to be invited to this. And I knew I could frame the film and make it look good, but it was great to learn, watching Fisher work, how to make a documentary and how to engage with your subjects. That was exciting.
Making a documentary, though, is an intimidating task, and even more so because it really is a global film. I mean, you're in, what is it, 12 races, 10 cities? So yeah, you're around the world. Was there any hesitation in jumping on board?
Not from me. I mean, for me, it was just super glamorous experience, because there was no pandemic. And you could go to Hong Kong, you go to Santiago, Paris, Rome, London.
Remember those days, Malc, when there was no pandemic?
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember we were in that crowd in Seville in the week of the Saints? We were locked in a crowd of about 250,000 people.
Yeah, we were literally crushed. We were filming in Seville, and they have this ceremony where everybody's dressed in these crazy kind of KKK, it looks like, outfits. Maybe it was a precursor. I don't know. They're in white robes with pointy hats and black robes with pointy hats, carrying Christ on their shoulders. It was a beautiful, actually, ceremony. And Malcolm and I were filming, and we were crushed. We were lost. We were literally crushed with people. I hope they didn't do it this year before COVID, because that was just a breeding ground for it. But anyway, we did love the travel. We loved learning about new cities, and we put beautiful kind of tableaus of each city we shot in as part of moving the race into the next place. So we look. I think both Malcolm and I could say it was one of the most exciting, best experiences we've had making movies.
And that does come across, I think, in the movie. You can see everybody, they are passionate about what they do. The shooting around the world, however, requires money. And what is it? Opium? Other people's money?
Yeah.
Were you able to raise the funding for a documentary and then go and shoot it? Or did you go and shoot hoping you could get the funding, or somewhere in between?
Well, I think because Leo DiCaprio was involved, it made it easy to raise the money. So we had the money first, yes. And we were lucky. The only thing that we kind of stipulated was that we had control of the cut, Malcolm and I and Leo. So we had final cut. Formula E gave us great access, but they couldn't tell us what we could and could not have in the movie, as long as we didn't destroy their brand or film anything illegal, which we would have loved to have filmed something illegal, but there was nothing, unfortunately, to film illegal. But yeah, so we were lucky in that way, and it does take. It wasn't the cheapest film I've ever made, for sure.
Tell us about the approach. Was there meetings about what sort of approach you would take to this, or was it let's go and start covering this and then say, well, let's go in this direction, let's go in another direction? I bring that up because it's a remarkably people-oriented film. It could have been a technological treatise on fossil fuels, and yet you focus on very human aspects of the drivers and the races.
I haven't seen the Michael Jordan doc. I'm dying to see it, but what the feedback I'm getting is, it's tough at the top, and I think when you're an intense competitor like John-Eric Verne in Formula E, you are a ruthless and very ambitious and driven and aggressive. And it's just to become a champion driver, you've got to be tough as nails, really aggressive, and I think chronicling that was really the key part of the experience. And I think, as Fish said recently, the technological world was the background, was the backcloth, was the firmament.
Yeah, to be honest, I think when Leonardo asked us to make the film, in his mind, we were going to make an environmental film. It wasn't going to be about the drivers. It was going to be about electric cars and how fast the technology is moving. And, we did actually at one point go to the Atacama Desert to film lithium. And we realized, like what Malcolm said, the heart of the movie is what Malcolm said. It's what's inside the brains, the minds of these drivers, the characters. It quickly became a character film. And we realized that the competition was really great. We have these two Brazilian guys that couldn't stand each other, that grew up together, Degrassi and PK. We knew that was drama. We knew there was like this incredible like rage between the two. We knew that Jev was like kicked out of Formula One. Also, he had a chip on his shoulder. His partner was a 37-year-old, 3-time Le Mans champion rookie. So that was kind of the thing. Those were the things we held on to in making it a character piece. And to be honest, I think Malcolm and I both make feature films, and we wanted this to feel like you were going into the cinema to see a movie, not a documentary. Like, this is a movie, fasten your seatbelts. Let's get into the human drama. I mean, I wish we had a couple more women in the movie. That's the one thing. It's such a male sport, male dominated. And unfortunately we didn't, but maybe the sequel.
Formula E Part 2. The characters in the film, the people in the film are all remarkable. Prominent, of course, is Alejandro Agag. Now, he opens the film. You couldn't have gotten a better character from Central Casting. He's such a larger-than-life character. That opening shot of him with the cigar, he's in his palazzo. You shoot him from a low angle, which makes him even larger than life. Tell us more about him, and tell us about shooting that scene with him.
Max, tell him what you thought when you first met him.
Well, I mean, he's in a way, he's a beautiful guy. He's a mass of contradictions. He's a very highly evolved Spaniard, isn't he? He can operate on a very, he can get you the Pope, and he's just a very, he's the kind of guy that gets things done, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. So we knew that we wanted Alejandro to kind of tell the story of Formula E, and I had done a few movies with Wes Anderson as an actor, very small roles, but Wes Anderson has always been one of my favorite filmmakers and one of my favorite people. And there was something about the frame, and Malcolm also said, like, we're gonna shoot low for everything, because of the cars, shooting the cars low. We as you mentioned, we film everything from a little below, and we thought, what a better tableau than that yellow couch, Alejandro with the cigar. It just reminded me of the way Wes would shoot, and it just was the perfect kind of way to meet this guy, because Wes's movies are fantastical, and he's a fantastical character. And also, I believe without him, we wouldn't have made the movie. Had we not met him right at the top and knew he was going to be one of the characters, I think that was one of the attractions that I had to the movie.
And I think, in terms of climate change, people like Alejandro, because he's a uber capitalist, he's a eco-capitalist. He gets things done. So I think Formula E has done a lot for awareness, and using competition as a kind of way of, that's the model for change, because young kids coming up now, they're looking at Formula E, because it's technologically advanced, and they're looking at it over NASCAR and over Formula One and over gas-powered cars.
Yeah,
that's great. You bring up NASCAR and the environmental message. NASCAR has been criticized for being 3 hours of left turns, and most of them, not all, are on tracks. But this is on the street, and this is bringing this technology to a street level. So tell us a little more about the environmental importance of this message.
Well, racing is a very, especially Formula One, it's very rarefied. It's like you have to spend a lot of money to go to the track. You drive out in the middle of nowhere to a track and, buy passes, and, everything is just expensive and far away. Formula E brings the race to the city. It brings the race to Red Hook, Brooklyn, to the heart of Paris, the 7th arrondissement, the heart of Rome, the heart of Santiago, the harbor in Hong Kong. They build the tracks. It makes driving more interesting. It makes the competition much deeper, much denser. You never know who's going to win. It's much more competitive than any racing sport I've ever seen. And I think that makes it wonderful. And also, like Malcolm says, it brings awareness of climate change to the streets, to the people, and makes it an issue for front and center. So I'm really hoping COVID ends soon, and that they can get back out there and preach the electric car gospel.
Malcolm?
Yeah, I mean, it's so exciting to be sitting or standing by Napoleon's mausoleum in Paris, and you got these electric cars whizzing around, and then people hanging out of their apartments. You got every type of person, milling around. It's like there's something wonderful, the crazy energy of that. And in Rome as well, it's the texture. You've got the ancient emperors, and you've got Caesar was here, and now Formula E is here. It's like there's something vibrant, and the energy is tremendous. So I do think in the future that Formula E will eventually migrate onto the bigger tracks once the cars become 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 horsepower, and they completely overwhelm.
It'll have to. It's going to go too fast. It's going to go so fast. These electric cars are going to be like rockets. And unfortunately, the streets can't hold that. But I still think the racing will be super exciting, and it's clean, and you can talk to people while the race is going on. And I'm very excited about it.
It's exciting to watch. Absolutely. The elements of a narrative film are in there with driver. I don't want to give anything away, but drivers coming from behind. Tell us about the drivers. Tell us about working with them. They all agreed to come on board, obviously, but tell us about their characters and working with them in a documentary setting as opposed to a narrative film.
Well, if it had been me interviewing the drivers solely, it would have been a disaster. Because the drivers are very difficult to crack. I think being a racing driver is a very absorbing, complex world. It's a very elite bubble they live in. But a winning driver, has a lot going on. There's a lot of relationships. And Fish, with, his natural ability, was able to kind of crack them open. Especially like Nelson Piquet, very, very shy. Jev. A lot of these drivers are being fired from Formula One. So they're very bitter and angry. It's a redemption, for them to get into Formula One. They must succeed. Don't you think, Fish?
Yeah, they were also, what really pissed me off at first with these drivers. First of all, they're all white, spoiled, privileged kids, right? Except Sam Bird, who had a tougher ride, but even he, his life wasn't so tragic before. So that was another issue. Like, oh my God, we're making a movie about a bunch of white privileged people, men. But quickly, after diving into them, you realize, there is a movie here because it's about winning. It is about sport, and I love sport, and just didn't love this sport or know this sport. So the other issue was that they're so used to being in front of a camera, like in their face, like being interviewed, that they're so their answers are canned, and they're just used to saying the same shit over and over, and they don't want to upset the sponsors who are putting a patch on their lapel for 50 grand. And it was really tough to crack some of these guys. But Jev, Jean-Eric Verne, he didn't seem to give a shit at the beginning. And Nelson Piquet, those two guys just, I don't know, there was something really raw and open about those two. And then Malcolm and I just tried to get everybody to be like that. And a few of them, it took a lot of energy, a lot of work, but we feel like we got there. And pretty much you're seeing them as at their most authentic, for sure, in their interviews.
One day we knew this one driver had a lot to say, and it was complex. And we knew Fish interviewed him over lunch, and I had to I had to distract his agent by pulling him away, and we were eating some Spanish ham in a trattoria and chatting, so I had to divert him so Fish could go for, open this guy up and get inside him, so it was really interesting working together that way.
They have handlers. They literally have press people. And then we were able by the end to get rid of all those press people. They're like, fuck, get away from them. Let's go. Let's dive in.
All right. So I want to go to my members' questions, but my usual question at this point is, what did you learn? Because we're a teachers organization. What did you learn about filmmaking from this specific project?
I learned a lot of visual techniques from Malcolm in terms of like where to put a camera, using wide anamorphic lenses. I would say it's definitely the most beautiful visual documentary I made. And that was quite wonderful. I also learned that I guess I constantly learn that character is the key, and people are the key to getting a message across. So it was just a constant reminder that preaching or having any environmental kind of standing on a soapbox and preaching just doesn't work. And you can be more effective under, doing a kind of stealth dive into the environment through character. So I think those were the two of the big lessons I learned.
That's kind of the definition of teaching. Malcolm, anything?
Well, it was interesting. I learned that you can change the world for the better by monetizing it, by turning it, by incentivizing it, by making green very profitable. And I was interesting to watch that and watch Alejandro at work and see his level of confidence and his level of risk is so high. I loved it. I mean, the dream of driving quickly and winning is something that people are children, kids. We grow up loving it, and to be in a car and winning a race, that intensity of that feeling is something we wanted to capture.
All right, thank you both. These are questions from my members. Dr. Robert Takach, quote, "It's remarkable how invisible the production is." And by that I mean you feel like you're really down there in the pits and the characters who are not acknowledging the camera, except for the one scene where the drivers say, "Let's annoy the film crew." How did you achieve that level of invisibility, multi-camera or editing?
I think, honestly, we made a little announcement before we started filming with the drivers that you have to forget we're here and we're not CNN and you guys just basically do your thing. So we really made an effort from the jump, but obviously there are moments of editing where if we felt they were not present and they were performing, we would excise it right out of the film. But they felt pretty comfortable with us. They're used to being filmed in the pits from their other cameras, from the broadcast. But we really tried to make the audience be immersed inside the world.
I think one thing to add to that is that we used wider angle lenses. As Robert Capa, the famed war photographer, said, if your photographs aren't good enough, then you're not close enough. And I think we made a concerted effort to be close to the action and close to the drivers, and wide angle lenses enabled that.
Helen Randall asks, and Fisher, you talked about this briefly before, were you in any way responsible for getting the Pope to bless the cars? How did that come about?
No, man. They not only were we not responsible, they didn't even let us film it. That was filmed by the Pope's camera guy. Alejandro was a member of the European Parliament. Alejandro's father-in-law was the president or prime minister of Spain?
Prime minister.
Prime minister of Spain. His wife's father ran the country. They had a lot of serious ties. Alejandro is a very Catholic person. And so, yeah, he's just connected, man. And he got us that Pope. Malcolm and I were trying to figure out before, we didn't know the Pope was happening. We had shot a scene in a restaurant in Rome where we filmed these great chefs making a carbonara in where was Campo di Fiori, this great restaurant in Campo di Fiori, and he's making carbonara, and we follow him out of the kitchen up outside, and there's Nelson Piquet with a napkin tucked in, ready to eat. The chef puts the carbonara down, and Nelson goes, "I love a carbonara." And that's how we were going to start Rome. And then next thing we know is that they went to see the Pope. So that got cut. Carbonara was good, though. Got to eat it.
Marlene Dodds Callahan, Senna is the brilliant documentary of Brazilian Formula One race car driver Ayrton Senna. Did that movie influence you in any way?
I would say Senna, I'd never heard of Senna till the movie. I didn't know anything about Formula One, but there were some great shots there, some team meeting shots. The intimacy that you felt with Senna was something we were after. So for sure, Senna. Actually, Max. We have a few shots of the movie we used from the movie that we licensed in Senna. When you meet who Senna is in our movie briefly, when Degrassi talks about how Senna influenced him and inspired him to be a driver. I thought that was a beautiful film. The other film that we really watched over and over again was Grand Prix by John Frankenheimer. So I would say Senna, Grand Prix, and Pumping Iron starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, when it was kind of brought him fame in this country. I'd say those are the three films we watched over and over.
We liked Weekend of a Champion as well.
And Weekend with a Champion, right. The Jackie Stewart story that Roman Polanski spent a weekend with Jackie Stewart in Monaco. That's right, Mike. Sorry, I forgot about that. those 4 films were that was kind of our Bible. Those were our Bible.
Okay, thanks. The Irene said asks, did I miss it? Was Tesla Tesla's largely absent from the film? Does Tesla have any plans to join Formula E?
No. Tesla, she didn't miss anything. She's right. There are no American car companies except Jay Penske has this little company in California that is part of a team called Dragon. Elon Musk just decided he didn't want to put any money or resources into racing, and he wants to focus on building as many Teslas as possible because he was so far behind. And no, Alejandro begged Elon to become part of this race series, but they just didn't. They didn't need the technology. They're doing their own tech R&D, as opposed to like Audi, Jaguar now, and BMW, and now Porsche, Mercedes are all in.
Right.
They're all using this as a R&D play as well. So they're doing all their research and development for the street cars in Formula E. Tesla said, you know what? We don't need a race series to do that. We're going to do that. And everyone knows us as electric. These other companies are using it also as a publicity play. Say, hey man, we make great electric cars. The Jaguar I-Pace, the Audi Q-tron, the BMW's electric cars. These are beautiful cars, and they're just starting to become mass produced. And Formula E is a great launch pad and development for these cars. So Tesla didn't need that.
Dr. J. Sewell asks, driving a Tesla is a completely different experience from a combustion automobile. Braking can be used for regenerating, recharging. Do Formula E cars do that, where you take your foot off the accelerator and notice I'm not calling it a gas pedal, take the foot off the accelerator and the cars brake? So do the drivers have to relearn to drive electric cars?
100%. A Formula E driver has a lot more work to do than your gas-powered racing driver. He has to deal with regeneration. He has to deal with energy loss, energy recovery. He has to deal with, managing the battery for the arc of the race. And there's a lot of monitoring he has to do. And he has to, fend off the people in front of him and try and attack the people in front of him and fend off the guys behind him.
I love the quote from the film. It's like playing chess at 200 miles per hour.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Gary DiOrio, the cars and the battery developments were definitely exciting to watch. It did make me think about an e-car being a viable, exciting experience, like a video game you climb into and drive. Could you tell us more about shooting those remarkably scary race scenes, better than any video game?
Well, Formula E have this organization where they shoot their races for broadcasts. So we used some of their footage that we felt was exciting enough. And we had our own cameras, 3 cameras, that we tried to get as low as we can to try and capture as much action as possible. We're very lucky, we're in a great age for photography now. Cameras are small and light, they can be hidden. Back in John Frankenheimer's day in the 60s, you had to bolt on very, very heavy film cameras. We weren't, we didn't have any of those obstacles.
The one thing we did do, which was really terrifying, is when the new cars, the Gen 2 cars, we sat in the back of a van holding our camera and had them come at us, and that was pretty scary. Our cameraman almost got nailed. That wasn't that was definitely a challenge. But it's cool footage.
You gave us a thrill ride with And We Go Green. Thank you very, very much for sharing your thoughts about the film.
I just want to do a little plug that after we did this project, Leonardo and I executive produced a series on the History Channel about Ulysses S. Grant.
Yes.
Grant that Malcolm directed. And it's quite beautiful, and we're very proud of that as well. And that was the project we did right after this.
We will tune in. Thank you both for joining us today.
Good talking.
Stay safe.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.